Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Sabado. It is Saturday, April 26, 2025. I am tired. I have had a crazy long week, and by the grace of God, it's looking like I may have my own house again in the next month. So if you guys wouldn't mind keeping me in prayer for that everything goes smooth. I may have a bat cave that is not showing the hallway of my other roommate's rental home. So, anyways, God's worked out some things in the economy that became available again. It looks like between owning a home and just maybe renting a room or two on Airbnb, I should be able to cover my basic living expenses and keep going and building this up without having to get a gerb, which is what my goal is. So I'm still living humbly, and hopefully God keeps providing for that. But I wanted to get into this series, which is all about the Nephilim, baby. So just to shamelessly plug merch, I wanted to show you guys a couple things. So I made a t-shirt. I'm wearing a version of it, but it's a prototype, and it says, "Bigfoots are the ghosts of Nephilim." This is a t-shirt that I'm going to be selling on my Batcave store, and if you guys want to be the most awesome person in your church who is sparking conversations about Nephilim for no apparent reason and has all the lowdown on Nephilim that I promise you won't get from any book or YouTube source, I'm going to give you the lowdown on Nephilim right now, and you guys are going to be the smartest X-Files Nephilim nerd in your church if you just pay attention carefully, okay? So you want to get the t-shirt before you show up at your church telling everybody everything they need to know about Nephilim, because this is going to be the this is going to be the foundation of deliverance ministry teaching. So I'm literally going to put this in my deliverance ministry teaching. I also had this other one, if you're feeling even more awesome than that. I actually asked AI to give me a photo of, or a picture of a Bigfoot with a face that looks like Biggie Smalls, because I grew up in the 90s and Biggie Smalls was definitely a better rapper than Tupac. I don't care what anyone says. And he came up with this image, and I'll see if I can get the image on there, but it says the notorious Bigfoot. It's all about the Nephilim, baby. So that's the t-shirt. I'll show you the image of the actual Bigfoot is right here. So this is what I got when I said I need you to merge Biggie Smalls and a Bigfoot. Okay, so he's the notorious Bigfoot. Okay. Anyways, that's what's on the t-shirt. That's what's on the t-shirt. If you want to be awesome as me and probably offend somebody, I'm sure you will. But I like Biggie Smalls. I like maybe I'll roll out a Biggie Smalls song at the end of this because he's so awesome. But that's what that is. So anyways, getting right to the Nephilim, I have been doing research on Bigfoots and various things like Bigfoots from all the different cultures in the world, because I'm mapping the spread of all the different primordial myths from the known world in terms of oral myths, in terms of scrolled on cave paintings, in terms of literally mythological histories, and then religions and cults in the whole world. And right up there with the flood, the most common myth is a wild man, or a bear man, or a monkey man. Okay, and what all this is Sasquatch. Why? Because this is what Nephilim looked like. Now, I am of the opinion that there are two kinds of Nephilim, and the reason is the OGs probably looked more like this. As they continued to breed with humans, they looked more like humans. So Goliath probably looked way more human than this guy, but this would have been an OG Nephilim, okay? So this is essentially based on Enkidu. So if we read the Bible and we go to Genesis 6, and we're going to just look really carefully about what the Bible says about Nephilim in Genesis 6, it says, When the people began to multiply on the face of the ground and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that they were fair and took wives for themselves for all that they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide with mortals forever, for they are flesh, and in their days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans. So the term went into is always a sexual term. And then we see that they took wives from themselves and they went into them, okay? The angels that did this are called Baals. Baal literally is the Hebrew word for husband, okay? So they took wives, that would make them Baals, that would make them husbands. So it says they bore children in them. These were the heroes that were of old. So you're going to see mighty men or heroes, but mighty men, David had mighty men. These are essentially the heroes of his military, okay? So they were the heroes of old, warriors of renown. Well, we don't have many tales of pre-flood heroes, but we have one very significant one, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's about a guy who the Sumerians' Kings List tells us is pre-flood, but we know, but the story is post-flood, okay? So this story would have been floating around in Moses' day when he wrote this book. It would have been a very popular story because we have Sumerian and Akkadian versions of it, and it just keeps going forward to Babylonian versions of it. So it's kind of like, think of like the story of Superman getting rebooted again and again and again, or the story of Captain America or Spider-Man. It just keeps getting rebooted again and again and again, and they would keep rebooting it. So when we look at Gilgamesh and Enkidu, I don't believe this is Gilgamesh, but it might be. I think this might be a reference to Gilgamesh, but we see Gilgamesh holding a lion. He's a giant, okay? When we get to the story of Enkidu, Enkidu is a wild, hairy man who is a match for him, which would make him a giant. So here's a picture of Enkidu, okay? Now, he's a wild, hairy man that looks like Gilgamesh. He comes from the wilderness. He is enticed through sex magic to go fight Gilgamesh, and then he ends up being friends with Gilgamesh, and he and Gilgamesh go fight a giant named Humbaba, who is in the cedar forest, which is Lebanon, which is right around Mount Hermon, which is where the Nephilim come from. So Mount Hermon it's actually in Israel's territory now, because Israel just took this over from Syria, but it's in the Golan Heights. And at the base of Mount Hermon is a city called Ashtaroth. And Ashtaroth is where Og, king of Bashan, was king. He was the last Nephilim king, okay? The last Nephilim that we have in Scripture are Goliath and it's either his 5 sons or 5 brothers. It's not really clear. Because it names another one of them Goliath. I think they're his 5 sons. So I think they're the 5 sons of Goliath, okay? And what we find is Og, king of Bashan, who is in Moses' day, seems to be significantly taller than Goliath and his sons, which were in David's day. So over the course of those 400 years, the Nephilim seem to have shrunk from around, his bed was like 13 feet to Goliath being about 9 feet, okay? So he shrunk by like almost a third, okay? So what's happening? Well, simple. The Nephilim, when they're originally purebred, seem to look like Bigfoots. They seem to be huge and hairy. And the reason is because certain angels have animal-like form, or animal hominid form, okay? So if we look at Ezekiel's angels, so we assume, because angels have appeared like men, that the angels that took wives looked like men. But here's the problem. The angels in Ezekiel didn't look like men, nor did the angels in Revelation. Now, some of them do look like men, so we're holding open the possibility that they were men, but other angels look like lions and bears, and these are things that were like half animal. See if I can get these pictures of them. These are things that were like standing up on humans' legs, and I want to show you. One is a bull on humans' legs. One is a a lion on human's legs, one is a man-looking thing on human's legs, and one is a bird-looking thing on human's legs. Now, it just so happens that these are the common images of the gods in the Old Testament, and the gods are the angels. The gods are the wicked angels, okay? So let's look at the Egyptian gods. We see some that look just like humans. We see some that have bird heads. We see some that have jackal heads. This one looks like a hippo. We see some that have serpent and frog heads, okay? And we know serpents and frogs are images used to depict demons in the book of Revelation, okay? We also know if we go to the Göbekli Tepe, carvings, what we find in the Göbekli Tepe carvings are animals that are hominid, but with bird heads. And we see pictures of things, and these are these would be half animal, half humans with erections. Okay? These are common motifs you are going to find in carvings of really ancient stuff that seems to be pre-flood. We're also going to see images in cave paintings and stuff like that of shamans and of bestiality. Okay? So this is where bestiality comes from. Remember, these angels might look like animals. So they took wives according to how they choose. It doesn't say that they courted them and asked their fathers for permission to marry them. It just says they took them. So it seems like they raped them. Okay? So I want you guys to understand when this happened and then when the angels were put in chains of darkness. Because we can read in Jude and we can find that it says, this is very important. This is one of the last books of the Old Testament before John's writings, and Jude gives you the key to understanding this. Now, he is not getting this from the book of Enoch, but I'm going to show you where the book of Enoch probably got it from, okay? So he says, now I desire to remind you, though you are fully informed, that the Lord, who once saved all the people out of the land of Egypt, destroyed those who did not believe, and the angels who did not keep their own position, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal change of deepest darkness for the judgment of the great day. So what are the angels who left their proper position? Well, one of the names that they would call angels, rebellious angels, was wandering stars. So this would be depicted in pagan stuff as the planets because they have a strange rotation. But the idea is that they're angels. Angels were supposed to be basically in the stars watching us. That's what they're supposed to be. But some of those angels chose to come down and sleep with women. Well, those might be the black holes. They're stars that no longer shine light. That might be. I don't know. But it says the angels did not keep their own position or their own estate or their own abode, depending on what translation you have. Well, I'm going to go to King James, and it's going to say they did not keep their first estate. Okay? So we're going to look at first estate. It says haitu, which is a word for own. It's not first. Own, and then archi. Archi is, I believe it's a principality. So they did not keep their own principality. That's what that is. So in other words, that's their own dominion, essentially. So archi is prince or principality. So they did not keep their own principality. They left where they were apportioned dominion. Okay? Which would be probably the position in the sky they watch us from. So they remember that the stars and the angels and the gods were all considered synonymous, okay? So they left their position, and then what does it say? It says, they left their own habitation. He reserved an everlasting change under darkness unto the great day. And then it says, even as, and when you see even as, it literally means just like Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth as examples, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So what is he saying here? There's a connection between the fallen angels who took women they weren't supposed to and in Sodom and Gomorrah, where they tried to sleep with angels. There's a connection between the two, and the connection's actually very clear and very logical, if you understand me. So let's go back to Sodom and Gomorrah. So we're just going to go right to the cross references, Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19. So we know that Sodom and Gomorrah they're so wicked they want to rape the angels. Okay, that's what they're like there. So there's two angels that came to Sodom. It's not obvious that they're angels because these three appeared to Abraham as three men, and two of them went down to Sodom and Gomorrah. So they seem to have looked like men, but Abraham and Sarah understood that they were divine. So something about the way they look is more than human. So they could be radiant. Who knows? Why did they look divine? We don't know. But when they go to Sodom and Gomorrah, the people want to rape them. Why? And the answer is simple. They're possessed by the ghosts of Nephilim. Okay? So this is in Genesis 19. We're going to go to Genesis 14. We have King Amraphel, the king of Shinar. He comes through with his kings, and it says in the 14th year, that's the 14th year, it says 12 years they serve Chedorlaomer, and the 13th they rebel. So these 12 years begin, I believe it's about 5 years before Abraham comes into the promised land. I did the math, and that is going to be in my Serpent by the Way book, but it's 5 years before Abraham goes in the promised land. They agree to serve Amraphel, king of Shinar, who I am convinced is Sargon's grandson, Naram Sin. Okay, El is a name from word, and Amra, or it's Amraphel. That is Amra is the same as like young bull. I believe it's young bull in the face of El. That's what that means. So he deifies himself. Naram Sin does. His original name is Naram Sin, means blessed of sin, but he deifies himself and starts wearing bull horns. Okay, and so this is young bull in the face of El, which is their word for God, and Sin was what they called the moon god. So he was blessed by the moon god, which is actually named after Sin, the father of the Sinites. But the Jews call him young bull in the face of El. Okay? And so he and his allies come through, and basically these guys serve for 12 years. In the 14th year, they rebel. So this is roughly in the 10th year after Abraham enters in the promised land. Now, it just so happens in that time that they enter in the promised land, Abraham has gone down in Egypt with Sarah and then come back. And then he is split with Lot, and Lot's gone down into Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? And so what he's going to do is, says they smote the Rephaims and Ashtaroth. So the Rephaims are the main tribe of Nephilim that come after the flood. Before the flood, they're just called Nephilim. After the flood, they're called Rephaim. Now, Nephilim means the fallen ones. Rephaim means the departed ones. Remember, if you've heard me talk about this before, this starts with Anana and Demuzid, and it seems like the first Nephilim were based on a myth that arose from Abel and his widow that became the idea that a woman could have sex with her dead husband. Like he could somehow reappear and have sex with her, and they could have a child together. Okay, this is the myth of Anana and Demuzid. Okay, remember Demuzid is Tammuz, and that's the queen of heaven and weeping for Tammuz. Well, that's pre-flood. The post-flood version of the queen of heaven is going to be Ashtaroth. Okay, and so her name is Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth, literally, I believe it means star wife. I believe that's what Ashtoreth means. So it might be a title, it might be an actual person, but her city is called Ashtaroth. Okay, so her name would mean Ashtoreth or Ashtoreth. Okay, so anyways, who she has sex with is the Baal. Okay, and because Demuzid, you have this title of this poem of Anana and Demuzid, and this is going to be in my Serpent by the Way book too, where she compares him to a bull, plowing her and filling her with his milk sexually. That's where Demuzid becomes the bull of heaven. And so you have a merger of Baal with the bull of heaven, and that becomes Zeus, who can transform into a bull and impregnate women. And his son becomes the Minotaur. Okay? So you're going to have that with King Minos. You're going to have a version of it where this woman is, he cheats on her, and so she cheats on him with some sacred cow. But that becomes the myth of Zeus and Inanna. It's like that keeps evolving over time, or Zeus and Astra. And basically, we know for certain that the name Adonis, which is a son of Zeus, is based on the Hebrew Adonai. We know that the Aphrodite is based on Ashtoreth, and Zeus is based on Baal. Okay, so the Greek gods are just evolutions of this stuff that came from the Danites. And so what we have is the Rephaims are the children of Ashtoreth with Baal, or the bull of heaven, which is just a generic term for husband. Okay, so what you have here is the Akkadians, and remember that these are Akkadians who are taking over. That's Amraphel of Shinar is Akkadian. Okay, they rule from Akkad, and then eventually Akkad is going to become replaced by Babylonia. Babylonia, Kish, and Akkad are just successive capitals that are all right in that same region where the Tigris and Euphrates get close together. Okay, so the Akkadians are going to take Inanna and merge Inanna with Ashtaroth and create Ishtar. Okay, and then you have the myth of Ishtar being the queen of heaven, and then they merge her with the astral deities to become Venus. Okay, so that's why Venus is always associated with a love goddess, because this is the woman who's supposedly so beautiful she even seduced the angels to fall. Okay, now we know when the angels get punished because it's going to be in Job, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Okay, so it says the Rephaims and Ashtaroth, and I checked. I did not look up Karnaim. I'll have to look. Ashtaroth Karnaim is the name of the city. Okay, the Zuzims in Ham. And this Ham seems to be Hamath. It's not Ham like Ham, the son of Noah. It seems to be Hamath, which is north of where the Rephaim are. And then the Emims and Shava Kirithaim is south of that area. So it's literally like the people right around Mount Hermon, the people north of Mount Hermon, the people south of Mount Hermon, and then it says the Horites in Mount Seir, which are the families that Esau is ultimately going to marry into. So these are not Nephilim. The Horites are a Canaanite tribe. The rest of these are Nephilim tribes, and this is important. So we have Nephilim north, we have Nephilim at Mount Hermon, and we have Nephilim south. This is going to be everywhere where Jesus is casting out demons. Okay, the demons, the unclean spirits, are the ghosts of Nephilim. They are not the same thing as lying spirits and angels and seducing spirits and all this stuff, where you have like a spirit who says, I'll go be a lying spirit in the mouth of false prophets. That's something different. The unclean spirits are spirits that possess people to do unclean things. So when you go to Leviticus chapter 18, these are the list of unclean things the unclean spirits get them to do. So it says, after the doings in the land of Egypt where you dwelt, you shall not do. After the doings of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall you not do, neither shall you walk in their ordinances. So notice this is not widespread behavior all over the world. It's just in Canaan. In fact, I've done my research, and in all the ancient mythologies in the world, aside from these cave paintings that seem to depict bestiality, which seems to be Nephilim impregnating women in the first place, and then these other things that depict these animals with erections, which seem to be Nephilim impregnating women, we have no instances of homosexuality, pedophilia, incest, rape, all that stuff doesn't seem to exist in the earth. The earliest versions we have of any of that is at Sodom and Gomorrah. And I mean, there's nothing archaeologically older than that depicts these things. So he says, notice it's the doings in the land of Canaan. They came out of Egypt. He's not saying the stuff is done in Egypt. He's saying it's done in Canaan, okay? And then he says, whether I bring you, shall you not do, neither shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall do my judgments and keep my ordinances and walk there, and I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. None of you shall approach any that is near of kin to him to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. Now, there are things that the Jews do in terms of close relations, and God's going to forbid that because incest is a common thing among the Canaanites, okay? Now, there are things that people did in the early days leading down to about the time when the Jews go into Egypt, and that actually, like if you married a half-sister, which is a daughter of your same father, or a first cousin, which is somebody who's from the same genetic strain of your generation, you would live longer. And the people that did that lived much longer than the people who just married someone young. So let's say I'm the last born son of my father, okay? And my father was 150 years old when he had me, okay? Well, I could marry somebody who's the firstborn daughter of somebody who's 2 generations later. Well, but that person's bloodline is going to be thinned out to where they might live to be 80 in the next generation. I might live to be 120 in the next generation. So the next generation, I'm going to marry a second wife because they've died when I got 40 years kicking. And I might have a second wife, and that second wife might be from 2 generations down from them. And the kids I have with that generation only live to be 70 to 80 years old, okay? And so that's why the Jews or the Israelites are going to live so much longer than everyone around them. That's why Jacob is going to say, I'm just a mere 130 years old. But I did not attain to the ages of my father because Abraham and Isaac lived to be 175 and 180. Because they're always marrying first cousins, or Abraham was his oldest sister, their ages break down a lot slower than most of the other people around them who are just marrying whatever. The Pharaohs try to copy this, and this is why the Pharaohs are marrying their brothers and sisters until they're genetically deformed, because they learn that from the Jews and they start doing it. Okay, but unfortunately they're doing it too late, and they're just end up being corrupted and deformed after that. So God is going to forbid this after it's the point where everybody is 70 years, 80th by strength, which is in Moses' day. People aren't going to get longer after that, but they're not going to get shorter after that. God forbids them marrying close kin anymore. So he says, none of you shall approach any that is near kin to him to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. The nakedness of thy father and the nakedness of thy mother you shall not cover. She is your mother. So nobody ever slept with their mother or father, but that's one that existed. We're going to have, what's his name? The eldest son of Jacob do that, okay, which is his father's, technically his concubine, but a concubine still counts as a wife. That's his woman. That's not, your woman, okay? The nakedness of thy father's wife you shall not uncover. It is your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, the daughter of your mother, she is born of home and born abroad, even their nakedness you shall not uncover. The nakedness of your son's daughter, Judah is going to do this, of your daughter's daughter, even the nakedness you shall not uncover, for this is your own nakedness. Why is that? Because they proceeded from your loins. Okay? So you're not to do that, which Judah did unknowingly, but the reason he did it unknowingly is because she was supposed to get a Levirate son from one of Judah's sons, and Judah wasn't giving up the son, so she just got it from Judah. And then it says he never touched her again after that. The nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, begotten of your father, she is your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness. That's what Abraham did, so that is now forbidden. It was not forbidden when Abraham did it. This is why it's not necessarily evil altogether, but it's evil now. And this is the point we're making here. This is not evil under the old covenant. This is evil, period. And the reason is because God is kicking out the Canaanites for doing these things, which means it's not just for the Jews that God is forbidding this. It's for everybody, okay? So you shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She is a near kinswoman. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister. She is a near kinswoman. You can't sleep with your aunt, which is what Moses' dad did. Okay, again, none of these things were illegal or immoral until God forbid them. Once he did, they became wrong, okay? Remember, what makes a thing wrong is that God says not to do it, okay? It's not like it's just naturally wrong, okay? Abraham didn't feel like a creep to sleep with his stepsister, yet now we have whole sections of pornography dedicated to sleeping with your stepsister and sleeping with your stepmom, and this perverse stuff that it's saying this is evil. Well, that's why it's enticing for porn addicts to look at the stuff, because it's evil, okay? But once upon a time, it wasn't considered evil. If you're living among a people where there's limited amounts of men and women, you're trying to maintain your lines more than anything. Abraham or Moses' dad is going to marry his aunt. That's just what's going to happen. So he says, "Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. Thou shalt not approach his wife. She is your aunt." Okay, so you're not supposed to marry your father's brother or your father's brother's wife. Okay, so this is also adultery. In a lot of these cases, it's also adultery. But he says, "Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Thou shalt not uncover her nakedness." Don't sleep with your daughter-in-law. And this is specific stuff later on in the prophets they're complaining that the Jews are doing. "Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife." It's your brother's nakedness. "Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter." This is what is the film guy? I forget his name, but he was like this creepy guy who was with this woman, and then he eventually got with her daughter. Okay, the idea of sleeping with a woman, you get a single mom, and you're like, oh, all of a sudden she's getting older, and her daughter's just getting in her prime, and then you go to the daughter. No, thou shalt not do that. Neither shalt thou take your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are near kinswoman. This is wickedness. Neither shalt thou take a wife unto her sister to uncover her nakedness, besides her other in her lifetime. So this is what Jacob did. So God is now forbidding this. You cannot marry a woman and her sister in the same lifetime. Thou shalt not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness as long as she is put apart for her uncleanness. So we're going to have ritual uncleanness. A woman on her period is considered unclean. And it's saying you shouldn't approach a woman to uncover her nakedness as long as she is put apart for her uncleanness. I take this to mean we're not supposed to sleep with women on their period. Because this is something that he's saying he's casting the Canaanites out of the land for, I would not do this. I would not do this. I think that's something that you can restrain yourself from having sex for a week. Okay? Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife to defile her. That's adultery. Thou shalt not let any of your seed pass through the fire to Molech. Thou now should not profane the name of God. I am the Lord. That is ritual sacrifice for your children, and this is specific. The reason they were doing this is these temple prostitutes were having sex cults to get pregnant and then sacrificing the babies as a way to tell the Baals, we want to have your children, not these children. That's what those rituals were doing. So they were sacrificing their children as a way to say, we want to have Nephilim children as your children. And it became a practice that got absorbed into Israel. Okay? Everything they're doing was about wanting to get the Nephilim back, which are these giants and heroes and champions. They're counterfeits to the seed of the woman promise. So the seed of the woman promise creates Jesus, who is the God-man. They're trying to make God-men from the angels. Okay, so they're trying to self-fulfill through witchcraft, ritual sex magic, and demonstrating their commitment through child sacrifice, and that becomes all the sex cults of Baal. Okay. It says, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. That's an abomination. So there's homosexuality. Thou shalt not lie with any beast or defile yourself therewith. Why? Where did the idea of sleeping with animals come from? Probably the idea of some of these angels looked like lions and bears and eagles and different animals, or half human, half hybrids, which is why we have satyrs, which are half goats, half humans. We have, what are the horse, half man, half horse animals that a Sagittarius is? We have the minotaurs, which are half bull, half man. We have different gods of these Egyptians, which have a bird head or a lion head and things like that. And you have the same thing in Acadia and Babylonia and stuff like that too. Those were depictions of the angels. So the idea is some of these people would ritually sleep with animals to demonstrate to the Nephilim, to the angels, we want to have your children. Okay? These are cult prostitutes and sex cult prostitutes. Defile not yourselves with any of these things, for in all these the nations of the nations are defiled, which are cast out before you. The land is defiled, therefore now listen to what he's saying. Defile not yourselves with any of these things, so you are unclean, you are defiled. Okay, so let's look at that word defile. Tame, it says, to be foul, especially in a ceremonial or moral sense, contaminated, polluted, to make thyself unclean. Okay? Unclean spirits are spirits that possess you to do things that make you unclean. Or doing these things that make you unclean make you open for business for these unclean spirits to go into you. Okay? Why? Because they're the spirits of the Rephaim. They're the descendants of the people. They're the dead ghosts of the original angels that did this. That's what they are. Okay? So he says, defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these things the nations are defiled. So these are the Goyim, or the Gentiles, are defiled, which I cast out before you. So he's talking specifically about the Canaanites, okay? And the land is defiled, therefore do I visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants. So this is something that if we were to do this, the same thing would happen to us. Okay? This is not specific to the law or the Mosaic covenant. This is something that God is specifying is the reason why he's justified to destroy these people. Just so you can see this in particular, I believe Ashtra was an Amorite, because the surrounding territory is the Amorites, and Og, king Bashan, was king of the Amorites. Okay, so I believe Ashtra was the Amorite, But what God says to Abraham in Genesis 14 is when all these Nephilim get killed. In Genesis 15, God promises their land to Abraham. But he says, but in the fourth generation they will come here again. He's talking about after they go into Egypt. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. In other words, they have not gotten so defiled yet that God feels justified wiping them out and giving their land to Abraham. Okay? So, but they're going to get there, and he knows that. Well, when you get back to Leviticus 18, this is how bad they are when their sin gets full. And it's so full that when Moses is just trying to pass through their land, and he's not even going to try to take their land, they try to come out and go to war. And so Moses kills Og, king of Bashan, and their people basically claim their lands, and those lands go to the half-tribe of Manasseh, the Gileadites, the Reubenites, and the Gadites. So they take that territory from Og, king of Bashan, and the Amorites, which is the last Nephilim king. Okay? He says, the land is defiled, therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomits out her inhabitants. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and not commit any of these abominations. So all the things that he just listed are abominations. According to God, sleeping with your wife on her period is an abomination. Neither any of your own nation nor any stranger that sojourns with you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done which were before you, and the land is defiled. That the land spew you not out when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. So he says, if you guys start doing it, the land will spew you out. And of course, they start doing all these things, and the land spews them out. That's why they go into captivity. Okay? For whosoever commit any of these abominations, even the souls of them, listen, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off from among their people. So he's not talking about sins of the father. He's talking about the individual souls that commit them. Okay? You get possessed to commit them. It's not necessarily if it's been done to you. If you got raped, you're not defiled. But if you rape, if you do bestiality, then you're to be cut off. Okay? Therefore shall you keep mine ordinances, that you commit not any of these abominable customs which were committed before you, that you defile not yourselves therein. I am the Lord your God. So notice these are abominable customs. Okay? So we look at all these things, and the one thing that would probably stand out to us is sleeping with a woman on her period. I think that's very specific. I think it's about sleeping with a woman with a specific intention of not having a child, and it's disgusting to God. It's like the guy who spills out his seed on the ground, okay? The point of this, the point of sleeping with women so as not to have a child on purpose, these would be done in sex cults, or if they get pregnant, sacrificing the child to Molech, is all about showing the Nephilim, we're willing to have sex, but we want to have sex with angels. Well, we're going to sacrifice all our human children until we get angelic children, because we want those heroes. We want those Nephilim. We want those seed of the woman. It's a corruption of the seed of the woman promise, okay? So that's what they've got going on. Now, we're going to go back to the pre-flood era, and we've got Gilgamesh and Enkidu, okay? Now, Enkidu, you're going to read, if any of you read the book of Jasher, it's a medieval Jewish book. It has no authority, okay? But they're going to merge the story of Enkidu with Esau. And the reason is Esau's a hairy man of the field. Enkidu is a hairy man of the field. And so they're going to merge them together as if they're the same person. And I've talked about this in the past as if there might be some merit to it. But upon doing my research, I know there's no merit to that. That's the Jews reading this story and merging it with the story of Esau. And so they want to make Gilgamesh Nimrod, and they want to make Enkidu Esau, and make it like this is how Esau killed Nimrod. All of that is untrue. Nimrod is Sargon, and Sargon seems to have died of old age. Nobody killed him. He seems to have died of old age at around 250. That's around the same age as how old Job was when he died, because he would have been a younger son of Cush with a woman from a younger generation. So if he had just been a son of Cush with his first wife, he probably would have lived to be around 400. But because he was the youngest son of Cush with another woman, he lived to be around 250. He dies of old age. He's going to be there for over 100 years before he does his takeover thing. And he is going to be there until most of those people who are that 400-year age range and the 250-year age range have died. And when they all start dying, he's like a god among these other people, and that's when he does his takeover thing. Then his son's going to rule. And then that son is going to get overruled by his elder brother who wasn't picked to rule after him. And then those guys are going to have all kinds of chaos. And then Naram-Sin, his grandson, is going to rule. His daughter is going to be the high priestess of the cult of Inanna and the priestess of the god Sin. And then his grandson is going to be called Naram-Sin, which is blessed of sin or Sign. So by that time, we know Sign is dead. He's been deified as the god Sign, and Sign is one of the younger Canaanite tribes. So Sign would have been one of the people who probably lived to be around 400 years old. He's dead and deified by the time Nimrod is taking over. So that's how we know Sargon of Akkad is Nimrod, and that's how we know by the time he's taken over, most of the original people from the Table of Nations are dead. Job is still alive. Job is going to be the last one to die because he's the youngest son of the youngest son of the Table of Nations. But you're probably going to have some Hebrew guys, like when he's alive, Shem is still going to be alive and Heber's going to be alive. But they're going to outlive most of the generations of the people that came after them because they lived to be 400 and 600 years old. So Shem and Heber are actually going to be some of the last ones to die. And then after that, it's going to be some of the sons of Joktan, which are going to be, Joktan's name meant little one because he was the youngest of the Table of Nations, and then he's going to have 13 sons. So those sons are going to be some of the last people to die, and they're going to be these Arab guys who are probably sages and stuff that dwelt from Yemen all the way up to Edom on the western Arabian coast. And Job is the youngest one of them. And so when the story of Job happens, he's over 100, which means all the other ones are probably dead. Okay? If not dead, they're going to die over Job's lifetime, and then Job is going to live to around the time that the Egyptians put the Jews into bondage. He's going to die actually right before that. So, this is why you're going to have stuff in the Talmud. The Talmud is going to act like the Pharaoh who killed Moses and the babies knew Job. Well, that's not true. Job is actually going to die probably about 20 to 50 years before that happens, if you do the math right. But it was close enough to the Jews to speculate that he knew him, he knew Moses' father-in-law, and then he knew Balaam, and all three of them got together and counseled Pharaoh when he was going to kill all the firstborn of the Jews. Okay, unfortunately, that's not true. That's going to happen about 150 years into the Jews' captivity, or the Jews moving into Egypt. They're going to put them into captivity. They're going to remain in captivity between 80 and 100 years. Okay? And so if Job lives to be around, his story is going to take place when he's around 110. He's going to die around 240. That means he is going to die about probably 30 years before the Jews go into captivity. So that doesn't work. But Enkidu, who Enkidu is and who Gilgamesh are two pre-flood heroes. One is a giant who is they say he's the son of Dumuzid, which is based on Abel. And so he is apparently this guy who is probably one of the first Nephilim ever created. There's two different versions of who he comes from. He's the son of some man, and then in another one he's the son of Dumuzid, which would have made him half god. And so they say he's the son of Dumuzid, and of course Dumuzid's wife is Inanna. Inanna is considered to be deified because she's the queen of heaven. She becomes the sister of Utu, which is based on Yahweh, Yahweh as the sun god. And so you have Inanna as part of the royal divine family, if you will, and then you have Dumuzid as her lover that is a god, or they would call him, Michael Heiser would say this is an Elohim, because the dead disembodied humans were considered Elohim too. And so Dumuzid would have been considered a god of the underworld. Of course, there are no gods of the underworld, because we know that when it comes to Sheol, Sheol is a prison, it's a pit, and Satan doesn't let anyone out of it. Okay, so you can read about this in, I believe it's in Isaiah. I'm not going to look this up right now because I forget exactly where it is. But Sheol is considered a pit, and one of the accusations of Satan is this is the one who wouldn't let anyone out of his prison. Okay? So Sheol is a pit in the belly of the earth, and it's basically like a prison pit. And that's where the dead go. So the dead don't get to come out like this. This thing that happened with Samuel was like a once in a lifetime experience because God did that to condemn Saul. Okay? It's also foretyping, which is what's going to be done with the Antichrist. Okay? It's such a rare thing because Antichrist is they call him the hated branch who is thrown out of his place of rest. So the Antichrist seems to really rise from the dead in a corrupt, abominable way. And it seems to be prophesied that he really does it, and it is like Saul raising Samuel up from Sheol. Okay? So the idea of necromancy usually is never raising the dead. What necromancy is doing is you're raising a familiar spirit that impersonates that dead person. So that's what Dumuzid would have been if Inanna or some other woman got pregnant by Dumuzid. The idea would be it's really a demon impersonating him who shows up maybe in a form that looks like him. Remember, this is an angel, so they can take that form. Others of them would show up like animals having sex with women, like Zeus becoming a bull and then becoming a man and then raping this woman and then transforming into a bull. These stories seem to be based on what really happened, and that's why you have these pictures of these half animal, half human people with erections that in these cult temples that they're worshiping. These cults would be around Canaan. They would be up around Göbekli Tepe, which is up around southern Turkey. So that makes sense because that's the same region where the Nephilim are going to be later, which is going to be Hamath is just south of Turkey. Mount Hermon is kind of west of Damascus. It's basically between Damascus and Tyre. And then south of that, you're going to go into Canaan. There's going to be Nephilim there as far south as the land of Hebron. That's where they go, but they seem to migrate there. They seem to start out in the north, and then they migrate there. And so they're really surrounding the land of the Jordan Valley already. That's where the Nephilim were, and then their ghosts are going to linger there afterwards, okay? So when do the Nephilim get put in eternal chains of darkness? Well, this is simple. If you look up in a King James Bible the word folly, the word folly, the first usage of it is when Jacob's daughter gets raped. It says, because he had wrought folly in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. So this is Jacob's daughter getting raped. They refer to that as folly. So rape is referred to as folly, okay? Deuteronomy 22 talks about a woman playing the harlot is called folly, okay? Joshua is this guy who takes the accursed forbidden things. That is called folly. So taking accursed things, rape, and harlotry are all referred to as folly. Now we go into Judges. If a man and the master of the house went out to say to them, this folly is when they rape the man's concubine to death. That's called folly. So rape, forbidden things, and what was the third one? Oh, harlotry, okay? Now we go again. So again, the man's concubine is raped to get it. It's called folly in Judges 19 and 20. The Benjamites committed folly in the land of Israel. 1 Samuel says, my lord Nabal, he says, now listen, this is important. Remember Abigail, who becomes David's wife. Abigail says of her husband, let not my lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial. Belial is a name of Baal. She's calling her husband a man of Belial. Even Nabal, for his name, so is Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. What she's telling him is he's gay. This husband, he's slandering David, his wife, a wife would never say this about her husband. He's a man of Belial. Belial is a Baal. He's in the sex cult. Folly is with him. So he is either gay or he is participating with temple prostitutes. Folly is with him, okay? But my handmaid saw not the young man of the Lord which thou didst send, okay? This is what she is saying about her husband, okay? So she's not just saying like he's foolish, he's stupid. She's saying he's a man of Belial, a man of worthlessness. Well, Belial is without profit, worthlessness, by extension, destruction, wickedness. Belial, evil, naughty, ungodly, wicked, okay? So, Bel-E-Al, okay? Let's break that down. So Bel is short for Baal. Belly, without lack of, profit, beneficial. So in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Belial is a source of temptation, sin, and evil spirits. The word means sons of worthlessness, but Beli would be like a children of Baal. So the E or EM is a son of Belial. So, but if it's just one, it would be Beli. That would be a son of Bel. Okay, and then Yaal, Beli Yaal. So that's what the whole words. Beli Yaal is a worthless son of Baal. A worthless son of Baal. Dead Sea Scrolls, he is known as the chief of demons, and the early church fathers considered him a satanic figure. Okay, so the words themselves can be Beli Yaal. So Beli can just mean without, and Yaal can be without profit or usefulness. So a worthless man. Okay, but it can also be related to Baal. The phonetic irony, Belial sounds similar to Baal, but its meaning is opposite, worthless rather than Lord. Okay, so we would find Baal-zebub is kind of rooted in Bel. Bel of the story, the apocryphal story Bel and the Dragon is based on Baal, and Bel is also a shortened form of Baal. Okay, so she's either just saying he's just worthless, but when you see that folly seems to refer to sexual sin and forbidden things most of the time, it sounds like he might not be sleeping with her. Because notice he calls her she calls herself his handmaid. She says this to David, his handmaid. Okay? Now that could just be a respectful way of saying, I'm here to serve you, because you're anointed of God. But she's calling her son full of folly and a man of Belial. Okay? So a man of no use, he's a no good, like nobody's just going to talk about their husband like this unless he's into something weird. Now remember, they're in Hebron, which is when this happens, and Hebron is an area where Nephilim used to live. Caleb is going to kill the Nephilim that are there. So the spirits that wrought uncleanness in the land happen to be around the region where they are, and this guy might be a pervert. He might be gay, he might be into temple prostitutes, and she might be saying, I am your handmaid, because she's like, he's not sleeping with me. He's not into me. That might be the case. And then he's going to choke and die, okay? So the choking and dying is obviously a demonic thing. God's not doing that. The demon's doing that. And what these demons seem to do is try to get you to commit sexual perversity and stuff like that, and murder and all kinds of weird stuff, child sacrifice. And if they can't get you to do that, they try to get you to kill yourself. So when you talk about people who are possessed to be cutting themselves, that would be a Nephilim spirit. That's why the guy with the legion in him is trying to cut himself. He's probably a guy who wants to do the right thing, but the Nephilim are getting him to try to do the wrong thing, and when he's trying to resist, they're trying to get him to kill himself. And that's why when Jesus casts them into the pigs, they immediately get the pigs to kill themselves. That seems to be how they release themselves back into the spiritual realm or whatever, so they can continue to roam around and find another host. They seem to be stuck in the host once they get in them. Okay? So, again, we have another thing. Folly, here's an example, is when David's son goes to sleep with his sister. He calls it folly. So I want you to see, of all these things called folly, there might be some question with Nabal, but you have the one guy taking the forbidden things from Jericho, and all the rest of them have to do with those exact same sexual sins that are in Leviticus 18 as forbidden. They're all called folly, all the way up to, this is from Genesis to 2 Samuel. So all the way up to the time of David, from the time of Abraham to the time of Jacob to the time of Abraham, all of those sexual sins that are listed in Leviticus 18 are called folly. Okay? Now let's read Job 4. Job 4. This is going to take place around the time that Jacob goes into, Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt. Okay? And it says, this is Eliphaz the Temanite. This is Esau's son. So remember, Joseph is Jacob's youngest son. He's a teenager. This is Esau's oldest son. So Joseph's older brothers, who they would have started having kids about, Jacob would have started having kids about 40, when Jacob goes to get his wife, he's 40. Esau already has 2 wives at the time, which means Esau is having kids probably when Jacob's, probably 20 to 40 years before Jacob is, okay? So Jacob's oldest is going to be Reuben. His youngest is going to be Joseph and Benjamin, okay? So by the time Joseph is a teenager, they're going into captivity, which means his oldest, Reuben, is probably upstairs of 60 now, which means Esau's oldest, Eliphaz, is probably upstairs of 100 by now. And that's why he's friends with Job, who's 110. They are 2 very old men. He already has a son named Teman, and Teman has grown into a clan, which is why he's called Eliphaz the Temanite, okay? So think about the time frame here. You're looking at Reuben probably being in his 60s, Joseph being a teenager, Eliphaz being around 100. This is Esau's oldest son, and this is what he's going to say. Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, and he's going to tell Job, here's what I think, okay? Now he's going to tell him why he thinks it. And this is going to be the basis of all the accusations that are made against Job throughout the whole book. Everybody, the other 2 guys are following his lead. One is going to be the Shuahite, and I don't know who the other guy's tribe is, but the Shuahite is going to be from a descendant of Abraham's through Keturah named Shua. So he's probably going to be an older guy too, probably in his 80s or 90s, but he looks like he's a 2nd or 3rd generation from Abraham as well, okay? And you're going to have Eliphaz being his friend because they're basically cousins, and then Job, who's going to be the youngest of Joktan, who's going to be a famous man because he's one of the last remaining people. He probably is the last remaining person at the Table of Nations at this time. So what Eliphaz is going to say to him, which is going to be the basis of everybody else accusing Job, is what he got from a demon. So listen to this. He says, "Now a little thing was secretly brought to me, and mine ear received a little thereof." So he got a demon whispering in his ear. "In the thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men, fear came upon me," that's not God, "and trembling, which made all my bones to shake." That's a demon. Okay? "Then a spirit passed before my face, and the hair of my flesh stood up." That's a demon. "It stood still, but I could not discern the form. Thereof an image was before my eyes. There was silence. I heard a voice saying," this is a Nephilim spirit. It's a demon. Notice, remember like the Bigfoots. Everybody's seeing them, but nobody can ever find a body, okay? Notice he's saying it's a spirit passed by for his face, made the hair on his flesh stand up. He could discern a form. There was an image before his eyes, and then there was silence. And I heard a voice saying, this is a Nephilim spirit talking to the son of Esau. Okay? "Shall mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his maker? Behold, he put no trust in his servants, and his angels he charged with folly." The angels, his malak, his messengers, he charged with folly, which is every single usage of folly all the way up until the time of David, and Job seems to come into the canon under Solomon. Every single use of folly is referring to sexual sin or forbidden things. Okay? What were the angels charged with? They were charged with folly. What does Jude say? He says they were cast into eternal chains of darkness, or chains of eternal darkness, for going after strange flesh, forbidden women, sexual sin. And then he compares that to Sodom and Gomorrah, forbidden flesh, sexual sin. And that's why you have the one with Achan, because that was stuff that was under the ban. It was forbidden. It's like taking the forbidden fruit, okay? So he charges angels with folly, how much less them that dwell in houses of clay. So he's not talking about physical houses. He's talking about our bodies that are made of clay, okay? "Whose foundation is in the dust," which is Adam, into the dust you return, "which are crushed before the moth." So he's saying, if he charges his angels with folly, in other words, sexual sin with forbidden stuff, he says they are destroyed from morning to evening. They perish forever without regarding it. He's talking about men. doth not their excellency which is in them go away. In other words, they're the image of God, but it goes away. They die even without wisdom. Okay? So what is the point? Job wants to know, why am I being punished like this? And Eliphaz's answer is, you don't have a right to know. We're just wicked. He's a Calvinist. He believes in total depravity. Okay? So he believes you're just totally depraved. Nobody's wicked. Nobody's righteous. But who's he getting that from? Listen, total depravity people. Who is telling him you guys are totally depraved? You have no right to know wisdom or why you are destroyed. God doesn't care about you. Okay? Who is saying that to him? A demon is saying that to him. And this is the reason why he judges. Now listen to what he says before this. If we essay to commune thee, will thou not be grieved? But who can withhold himself from speaking? Behold, thou hast instructed many, and thou hast strengthened weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was failing. Thou hast strengthened feeble knees. But now it has come upon thee, and thou faintest. It touches thee, and thou art troubled. Is not this fear thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? In other words, are you trusting that because you do the right thing, you're going to be judged fairly? You're wrong to do that. This is what the Calvinists say. You can't be righteous. God is either going to choose to save you or he's not. Okay? He says, remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, and where were the righteous cut off? In other words, everybody who dies is guilty. Well, wait a minute. This sounds like inheriting Adam's sin guilt. Everybody who dies is whoever perished being innocent. So when a baby dies, the baby's guilty. Where were the righteous cut off? Well, those are wicked babies. Do you see this? This is what Eliphaz the Temanite believes. It's believing in inherited guilt. And this is why in Jeremiah, when he introduces the new covenant, he says, no more will you say, the parents have eaten bitter grapes and the children's teeth are sour. No more will you say inherited guilt. So why are we still saying inherited guilt among the Catholics, among the Calvinists, among the Baptists, and all these people? We did not inherit Adam's guilt. Okay? We did not become unrighteous because of Adam. We become unrighteous because of our own sin. That's Ezekiel 18. The soul that sins must die. Okay? We do not become unrighteous because of Adam's sin. And that same line about the children eating, or the parents eating bitter grapes and the children's teeth being set on edge, is in Ezekiel and in Jeremiah, both in reference to the new covenant. We do not say that we are guilty because of Adam's sin. Okay? We are guilty because of our own sin, and we are free to choose Christ. Okay? But Eliphaz the Temanite, Esau's oldest son, is saying, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, where were the righteous cut off? The answer is every time a baby dies. So there's your answer to your question. You're wrong. Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. So he's assuming Job is wicked, but what does God say about Job? God says, he was a man who was perfect and upright, one that feared God and turned from evil. Okay? So that's the narrator saying this. But then we go to the Lord said unto Satan, has you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man that fears God and turns away from evil. That's what ischeweth means, okay? So the Lord's saying he's perfect and upright. He fears God and he turns away from evil. Now, why is he being tested in the first place? And the answer is because Melchizedek is dead. And the Lord has the angels searching for a perfect and upright man to replace Melchizedek as the intercessor over the earth until the Mosaic priesthood is ready. Or the Levitical priesthood is ready. Okay? So, he says, Satan answered, does God fear Job for naught? Okay, so notice the Lord is saying he is perfect upright in his ways. After Satan kills him, he also says, Satan came before the Lord and he said, is he considered my servant Job? There's none like him on earth, a perfect and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil and holds fast his integrity, although you moved me against him to destroy him without cause. So even after you moved me to do this without cause, he still holds fast to his integrity. In other words, his integrity means the consistency of his character. He still is a perfect and upright man who fears God and eschews evil. That's what the Lord Yahweh is saying about him. But what Satan is saying about him and what Eliphaz the Temanite is saying about him is what every Calvinist and Catholic says about him. Think about that. They look at the words perfect and upright, and they're like, well, he's really wicked. Your charismatics are going to say, because he is offering up sacrifices for his children. So this is what Job would do. He says, his sons would feast in their houses, and it said, and when the days of their feasting were gone, Job sent and sanctified them. He sanctified them. He made them holy. He rose up in the morning, offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. What is the atonement sacrifice? It's a sacrifice for in case someone sinned in ignorance. In other words, they're there eating and drinking, and they might have said some blasphemous thing against God. Well, God says all blasphemy against the Father and the Son will be forgiven. The atonement sacrifice is for the stupid stuff you say and the stupid stuff you do, not intentionally, not thinking. Okay? That's what the atonement sacrifice is for the sins of ignorance. That's why David would say in the Psalms, keep me from willful sinning. Okay? It's willful sin that's going to get you dead. The sins of ignorance are atoned for in the blood. Okay? It's the willful sinning. It's you loving your sin and doing it on purpose that's going to get you in hell. Okay? So Job is acting as a priestly intercessor over his kids. Now, most people would surmise from this that this is what every father does. No, it's not. We don't have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob doing this. Abraham offers up sacrifices like 3 times in his whole life, and so does Jacob. We don't have regular intercessory sacrifice like this from anybody. Noah does it 1 time in his life. What you have intercessory sacrifice from is priests. And you have the Babylonian priests doing it, and then they're doing augury with the guts and all that stuff like that. And then you have the Levitical priesthood doing it, and probably you had Melchizedek doing it. But you also have Job doing it. Why? What is he being looked at for? As an intercessory priest in place of Melchizedek. Melchizedek is now dead. Okay? And by the end of the book, the Lord is going to say to Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, he's going to say, and he's going to say this to them. He said, and it was so that after the Lord had spoken these words to, we're going to go back to 41. He says, and it was so after the Lord had spoken these words to Job that the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my wrath is kindled against thee. I'm ticked off at you, son of Esau, and against your 2 friends, for you have not spoken the thing that is right as my servant Job has. In other words, you gave him bad religion that you got from a demon. He's pissed at them for that, okay? Therefore, take you 7 bullocks and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering, and my servant Job will pray for you. For him I will accept. He's righteous like Christ. He's going to be the high priest who him I will accept, lest I deal with you after your what? Folly. Folly. Folly is not foolishness. He was demonically inspired by a Nephilim spirit to believe what he said and say what he said against Job. In that you have spoken of me the thing that was not right, like my servant Job did. You were demonized, Eliphaz the Themanite, and you spoke false religion over my servant Job. Okay? And that false religion happened to align with total depravity. Calvinism. And he's saying, so if Job intercedes for you, you bring the sacrifices, and Job prays for you, I will forgive you. You must be atoned for, you must have an intercessory high priest, and I will forgive you because I received the high priest, not because I receive you. Do you see what that is? He doesn't receive Eliphaz by himself. He receives the high priest who prays for Eliphaz. This is us in Christ. For all the stupid stuff we do, it's not because we said we're sorry that he forgives us. It's because Christ offered up the sacrifice. He is the sacrifice and the high priest. He offers up his own blood. Okay? So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did according to the Lord commanded, and the Lord also accepted Job. Job is their priestly covering. Okay? So the Lord turned the captivity of Job. When he prayed for his friends, the Lord also gave Job twice as much as he had before. Job is now an intercessory high priest over 3 different men, plus his children, and they're of different nations. He is now the new Melchizedek. He's the only other person besides Christ who is in the order of Melchizedek, and he goes on to become King Jobab of Genesis 36. So, just so you see in Genesis 11, Genesis 10, when you get the sons of Joktan, you have Joktan beget Almadad, Shalef, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Diklah, Obah, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. These were the sons of Joktan. Jobab is probably from a second wife. He's the youngest. And he's still going to live to be 248, which is a big deal in his age, okay? In Genesis 36, we're going to see this is when they're giving the lines of Esau, and these are going to be the lines of Esau down to the Israelites coming out of Egypt, okay? So you say Esau dwelt in Mount Seir. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman. That's why he's called Eliphaz the Temanite. We see the Amalekites are going to be the sons of Eliphaz and the Horite, the sister of Lotan, okay? So Lotan is going to be the son of Seir. That's what Mount Seir is named after. His son is Hori, and it's going to become a clan, and the clan is going to become Horites, and it's the Horites who Esau marries into. So his wife is a Horite, and it's going to say who his wife is here, but his son, Eliphaz, is going to sleep with Lotan's sister Timnah and produce the Amalekites. So just so you see, Eliphaz is demonized already. He gets forgiven, but he's going to go on, or maybe he already has produced the Amalekite line. So with a Canaanite woman. So the Horites are descendants of the Hivites. The Hivites would have been the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah would have been Hivites. And the Horites would have been a clan that came from them, and that's who were decimated at the same time that the Nephilim were decimated by King Amraphel. Okay, and then Esau is going to marry in with them. So if you wonder why the Edomites and the Amalekites are so bad, is because they're married in with the families around. They're all around the Dead Sea, which is where Sodom and Gomorrah was. And so the Nephilim spirits that were turning these people to homosexuality and murder and all this stuff we see evidence that they're affecting Eliphaz the Temanite. Okay? And so what's going to happen is you're going to have Lotan is going to have a descendant, and his descendant is going to be Zibeon. Zibeon is going to have a daughter, I believe Holibama is going to be Esau's wife that comes from her. So let's look up here. We see Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. So he has a Hittite wife, and Holibama, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite. Okay, so the Hivites the Horites are descended from the Hivites, and Zibeon's daughter, Aholibama, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon. So it says Aholibama, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon, the Hivite. Okay, so it's a granddaughter of this Zibeon who is going to be Esau's second wife, and the third one is going to be Basemath, Ishmael's daughter, the sister of Nebajoth. So the Nebajoth is where the Nabateans come from, who ultimately displaced the Edomites, and they're the ones who built Petra. And Petra was the original spot where Islam came from. Okay, so Ishmael's daughter is going to marry into, that's his oldest son is going to marry Esau too, and that's where he's going to get his first 3 kids. Eliphaz is going to be the first one from the Hittite. So Eliphaz is actually half Hittite. Basemath is going to have Ruel, and she's half Hivite. Okay, so Eliphaz is half Hittite, and then he's going to produce the Amalekites with the Hivite. So the Amalekites are more Canaanite than they are Edomite, because they're going to be descended from Hivites or Horites, and they're going to be descended from Hittites, and then partially from the line of Abraham. Okay. And when they have all these kings here, eventually you're going to have kings ruling in the area, and you're going to have these dukes that come from them. Dukes are basically like lords or chieftains. And then it's going to say Bela the son of Beor reigned in Edom. Bela is going to be the one king from Zoar who survived Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember when Lot prays to spare one city, they're going to spare Zoar, and Bela is the king of that city. So Bela is going to reign over Edom, because remember, the Horites get decimated by Amraphel like 10 years before that. the Sodom and Gomorrah is going to get destroyed, and he's going to be the last remaining king. And so you're going to have this decimated tribe. This is before Esau marries in with them, and he's going to rule over because he's from this tiny city of Zoar. He is the weakest of the 5 kings, but the other ones are dead, and then the Horites are decimated 10 years before that. So he's going to go rule over them in Seir, okay? So he's going to reign from a city called Nineveh. And he is probably from a generation of people who still live to be anywhere between 150 and 250 years old, which means he's going to reign for a while. So by the time Job is 100, this guy is going to die, and sometime after the story of Job, he is Jobab, the son of Zerah. That's why he's called Zerah. Remember, Zerah is going to be, let's go back to Zerah. So Zerah is the son of Ruel, who is the son of Ada, Esau's wife. So that Horite that marries Ada, let's go up here. He is going to have Ada, the daughter of the Hittite, is going to have a son named Zerah. Okay? So these are the sons of Ruel. Eliphaz, it says, and Ada bore to Esau Eliphaz, Bathmath, and Ruel. So Ruel is going to be the Horite. And then Ruel is going to bear Basemath. Ruel, the son of Basemath, the wife of Esau. Okay, so Ruel is going to bear, these are the sons of Ruel, Nahath and Zerah. Okay, Zerah is going to have a daughter that is going to marry Job. So that's going to be the Job's first wife bore all the kids that died. Zerah is going to bear the 10 kids that have after that. Okay. So Zerah is the granddaughter of Esau from his second son. And Eliphaz is over 100, which means that son is probably over 100 by that time too. And he has got a daughter or a granddaughter. He's got a daughter, and that daughter is going to be married to Job. Now, I found a Syriac version of the Old Testament that has all this stuff, that it says Job's first wife was an Ishmaelite, and then his second wife was the daughter of Zerah, the Edomite. And then he's going to live to be like 110 when his story happens, and then afterwards he's going to live to be 248 total. So he's going to live for like another 138 years, okay? I probably got those numbers mixed up, but it's about right. So Jobab, let's see if we go to Jobab now. After Bela the son of Beor reigns in Edom at Nineveh, Bela's going to die, and Jobab the son of Bozrah reigned in his stead. So Job is going to become the next king, and he's going to reign for probably over 100 years. During that 120-year reign is going to be the time when the Jews are in Egypt, but they're friendly with the Egyptians, co-reigning with them. So you're going to have Jacob and his descendants co-reigning from Goshen with the it's going to be, I believe, the Captorite or the Abydos dynasty that is at Thebes. And then that dynasty is going to get overthrown, and then the Jews are going to go into captivity. But during that time, you also have Job reigning from Bozrah. This is why the Jews are going to speculate that Job knew Pharaoh, because he would have been a king of Edom, which is right across from the Red Sea from where he is. And then the other guy would be a sheik of Midian, which is right across the Red Sea from where Pharaoh is. So they believe they all knew each other. They would have all taken counsel together. And then they believed Balaam was a prophetic oracle or seer from Mesopotamia, and he probably dwelt somewhere like at Damascus or at Mari, which is where these oracles to the false gods would have dwelt. Okay, so these guys would have been famous. They would have been in the region. They also would have been all privy to the story of Job and how God appeared in the whirlwind, and that's why Baal becomes the storm god. Okay, so he would have been known all over this place. Now I want to show you something. Another name for Baal is Hadad. That's what they call him in Mesopotamia, okay? Well, it says Jobab died, and Husham of the land of Temani, so that's where the Temanites are, reigned in his stead. So a descendant of his friend Eliphaz the Temanite takes over as king after him. Then it says, and Husham died, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, reigns in his stead. So remember I told you another name for Baal, the storm god, is Hadad, okay? Hadad was the king 2 kings after Job. So this would have been in the period where the Jews are in captive to Egypt. And he says he smote Midian in the field of Moab, and he reigned in his stead, and his city was Avith. So Hadad is the name of an Edomite king, not a storm god. But somehow, because they're doing ancestor worship back then, he is merged with the Lord appearing in the storm to become Baal Hadad. And Baal Hadad becomes the storm god among the Mesopotamians. So this is going to be from the land of Haran, which is where Elihu is from. And Elihu is the guy who's talking right before the Lord appears in a whirlwind. So if we go to Job, we see in chapter, I think it's like 36, Elihu, okay? 34. Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite of the kindred of Ram, okay? Now, I don't know who Ram is here because there's multiple people named Ram, but who's in Buz? See if we can find Ram here. Not Ram, because there's a person named Ram in Chronicles, I believe. Ram is the son of Hezron. So Ram, the son of Hezron, would have been a descendant of, or an ancestor of David and a descendant of Judah. I don't think it's him. I think that would have been the wrong timing. But it may be. In fact, he might be the source if this is a descendant of David, okay? So, if we go to Job 32, it says Elisu, the son of Barachel the Buzite, so he's descended from Buz. Abraham's brother has 2 sons named Huz and Buz, and they're in the land of Uz, which might be Huz, okay? There is also a land of Uz in the descendants of Esau, but it seems like it could be too late for this. But it's possible that this either took place around the region between Damascus and Haran, or this took place in the region of Edom. Since Eliphaz the Temanite is there and he ends up settling down over there and being king, that's not strange because he's going to marry in with the Edomites. So that's not strange, but remember, he has huge flocks and herds, and he's probably a nomadic herdsman like Abraham was. Okay? So what you have is Elisu, the son of Barachel the Buzite, so that's a descendant of the kindred of Ram. So he seems to be descended from Ram, the son of Hezron, and I believe Ram is the firstborn son of Hezron. So let's see. No, I'm sorry. Reuben, the sons of Reuben, Hanak, Phalu, Hezron, Carmi. The sons of Pharez, Hezron, and Hamul. Also the son of Hezron that were born unto him, Jeremiel, and Ram, and Calebai. Okay? So Hezron would have been a son of Judah. So this actually could work. Judah would have been one of the older sons. He could have been like 60 right now. Hezron would be his grandson. And Buz could have married in with that grandson. So this actually would all work. Hezron would have been, let's see, a son of Pharez. So Pharez has Hezron, and Hezron says Ram. So that would be a great grandson of Judah. By this time, let's see, how old would Judah be? If Jacob is 130 when they go into Egypt, yeah, this would work because Judah could be, by the time they go into Egypt, he could be as old as 80 or 90 years old. So could he have a Pharez, which is technically his son, but it's also his grandson. So we're going to say his son, and then his son he's going to be a son from an older age man, and then he's going to have Hezron, and Hezron's going to be Ram, and Ram could be marrying age by that time. So what it looks like is Elihu from Job is married in with the family of Ram of Hezron, which makes sense because those guys would have dwelt maybe around Hebron, and they would have gone back and forth to the land of Aram, the Arameans, in Haran to get their wives while they were friendly in Egypt. So this could take place around that time, okay? And then so it could be a little after. I could be mistaken on the time. It could be a little after this, okay? But we have Elisu, the son of Berekite, the Buzite. So on one side he's descended from Abraham's brother. On the other side, he seems to be married into the Judahite line, which makes sense that this story would come to the house of David because he's married into the Judahite line, Hezron, which is actually where David comes from. That's David's line. Okay, so he says, Elihu, the son of Berekite, the Buzite of the kindred of Ram, against Job his wrath was kindled because he justified himself rather than God. So he's going to give Job a tongue lashing even though he's a young man, okay? He's a young man. So this guy might have become a kindred of Ram later on. Like he might have married in with the family of Ram after this, but he was a young man when he stands up to Job, okay? And so he says he's saying all this before he's like, I waited for age to speak, but whoever the Spirit of God is in, that's who should speak, right? So he's a young man, but he probably later became married into the family of Ram, and that's how David got the story, okay? Now, we go to what he says. He is going to stop speaking on chapter 37. So it's going to say this. He literally is just like, farewell cometh out of the north, and the Lord is a terrible majesty. Touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. He is excellent in power in his judgment, and in plenty of justice he will not afflict. Men do therefore fear him and respect that not any are wise of heart. In other words, we don't know what God's ways are unless he tells us. Okay? So he's saying this, and now listen to what he's saying. And now men see not bright light when it is in the clouds, but the wind passeth and cleanseth them. Okay, so he's talking about the Lord like he's like this cleansing wind that's going to come through. And immediately as he's speaking, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel without knowledge? So Elihu is speaking and declaring who the Lord is by the Spirit of God. And then the Lord, Yahweh, appears in the whirlwind speaking to Job. Okay, it's almost like Elihu is speaking as a prophet and then the Lord shows up in person to assay Job, okay? And then Job passes the test by humbling himself. And then at the end, he's going to become an intercessor for his friends. So all this seems to be this Elihu who is going to, when he gets older, marry into the family of Ram. That's how the story hits the Davidic line. And that's why it becomes part of the wisdom literature, which was all from the house of David. So the Psalms, the Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Psalm of Solomon, and Job was all part of the Davidic literature. Okay, so that's where we get all this stuff. Okay, what does this have to do with Nephilim? If you understand the timing of all of this, you understand that you have a Nephilim spirit involved in perverting the mind of Eliphaz the Temanite towards total depravity, inherited guilt, and basically Calvinism, a form of Calvinism. You know, God just destroys men because he can, and he doesn't care. That's what Calvinism says about all the people that God didn't elect. He can do whatever he wants because he's God. Has not the potter the right over the clay to make a bunch of vessels just for smashing them? That's how a Calvinist thinks, okay? That's how Eliphaz the Temanite thinks, and he got it from a Nephilim spirit demon, okay? So why is that Nephilim saying this? The Nephilim is saying that because their fathers, the angels, were bound in chains of darkness for folly. That's what happened, okay? So we know when it happened. It would have happened somewhere in between Genesis 14, when these Nephilim are killed. So it's Genesis 14. Genesis 19 is when they corrupt the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is going to be within a decade of that. Okay? And then Genesis, probably by around the end of the book of Genesis is somewhere around this when the book of Job happens. And we know that Nephilim spirits are saying that their fathers were bound up in folly. They were bound up for their folly. They were charged. In other words, they were charged with a crime. And that crime was folly. What was folly? Taking forbidden things and sexual immorality, strange flesh. So they were taking women to make wives for them, and they were charged with folly. So at that point, all the angels that had been involved in making Nephilim are all bound in chains of darkness. There are no new Nephilim coming. No OG Nephilim. Those Nephilim can then breed with women and have other half Nephilim, and those Nephilim are going to get diluted down the line. And so the Nephilim that existed back then are going to be bigger and taller than the Nephilim that come after this. So why is this important? Because all around the world, Nephilim, remember, the original Nephilim would have been made probably in Sumer and in the surrounding region of Canaan and in Gobekli Tepe, okay? After that, you're going to have Nephilim being basically heroes going around the world, pioneering things, climbing mountains, doing all the heroic things, okay? Fighting in wars, doing all this stuff, being kings, okay? This is why you have these Bigfoots all around the world. And so I had ChatGPT just drum up a list of all these different kinds of Bigfoots all around the world. Let's see if we can find this here. North America, we have Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Wendigo, Skookum, Tesmequays. These are all different names for Bigfoot-like creatures. These are typically creatures that are listed as being 7 to 9 feet tall in all these legends. In Russia, you do have a shorter version of one. Remember, these creatures, these hairy, they're wild men, okay? They're described as wild men, bear men, or monkey men, okay? Why? Because bears and monkeys are two hairy creatures that stand up on two legs like a human. And so you find them in the Mayan Popol Vuh. They're called the next people who were made after the men that were made out of clay. They say they were made out of trees, and they became monkey men after the flood, okay? So we have monkey men. We have in the Himalayas, we have Yetis, Zute, Meitei, Almas. That's the Mongolians, that's the Nepalese, and that's the Tibetans. Okay? So we have three different cultures of people who have something like a Sasquatch. We have North America. We have 5 different groups of people, or we have 4 different groups of people who have something like a Sasquatch. Okay? Then in Northern Europe, we have trolls, giants, Huldra, Bergeret, which is a mountain spirit, troll-like beings guarding mountains. Huldra, mystical forest woman with animal features, being wild but not quite a giant related, so that's not one of them. We're not going to count that. So we have trolls, Jotnar, giants, and mountain spirits, okay? 3 different, these are Scandinavians. Remember, the Norse and the Finnish and the Swedes are different tribes of people, okay? But they have 3 different kinds of Nephilim. They understand them to be spirits, but trolls, and they if you look at the story of Beowulf, you have a troll impregnating a witch to make another troll. Okay, so that's the story of Beowulf. In Western and Southern Europe, so this is going to be where the Celts and the Franks and the Germans were. You have ogres, giants, and then Nephilim in Christianized Europe. Basajun, which is in the Basque Company. The Basques seem to be related to the Indians from India. They call them Lord of the Woods, giant hairy being protecting forests. So we see them as spirits of mountains and forests. Where are the sex cults of the Baals? They're in sacred groves or sacred forests, okay? So that's where they're trying to create them. We see in the Middle East, they're called ghouls. That's another name for Nephilim spirits. Anka is an enormous bird tied to desert giants. That's in Arabian folklore. And then the Nephilim and Rephaim they believe in, okay? In Africa, they're called, this is Adzi, or giant bat-like creatures. There's nothing wrong with bats at all. Nandi bear, so they're bear people. Typically, if they're in the north, they're going to call them bear men. If they're in the south, they're going to call them monkey men, because that's what they have to compare it to, okay? A cryptid, said to be a giant bear-like creature, sometimes called a forest giant. So that's Nandi bear. That's in Kenya. That's in Ghana. Those are opposite sides of Africa. We have this. And then we have Grootslang in South Africa, a monster said to be part elephant, part serpent, and huge and ancient. So this would be like a, I forget what you call it, but those creatures, chimeras, okay? So that probably is based around an angel, but the bear men and the Adzis are... Well, these say they're shape-shifting. They're not exactly giant, so we're not going to count those. But the Nandi, the bear men of Kenya, and the Grootslang of South Africa both seem to be based on Nephilim or these angels, okay? In Oceania and Australia, and the Aborigines have a giant hairy humanid of the outback, very Bigfoot-like, called Yowie. The Moyao of the Maori, which are going to be the New Zealand people. These are also going to be the people who go on to populate Hawaii. Wild giant of the mountains of the Moyahu. The Taniwa of the Maori also is a monstrous water and land spirit, sometimes gigantic, so we're not going to count that. We're going to see 2 right there. So this is in Australia. This is in the Polynesian Islands all the way to Hawaii. Okay, they have wild giants of the mountains. Okay, the Yaren, this is in East and Southeast Asia. This is China. The Yaren, the wild men, red-haired humanoid said to live in remote forests. Okay, remember Esau was a red-haired humanoid. So Esau is meant to be Esau and Jacob are kind of meant to be a type, it seems like, of Nephilim versus godly. It seems like that. And don't get into the Nephilim bloodline things as if who's elect and who's not has to do with bloodlines, okay? Because Jacob and Esau were twins from 2 humans, okay? But Esau seems to have features that reflect Enkidu. And that's kind of strange. Orang Padek, so that says a short person, shorter than a Bigfoot, but considered a wild forest wild man. So some of these could be like orangutans and stuff, okay? So what I would suspect is that because of the Nephilim, people eventually thought that apes were small Nephilim. That's what I would suspect. And so what you have is the whole idea of humans coming from apes seems to be based on apes coming from Nephilim. Because remember, they're going to get shorter over time. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have people finding these shorter apes and say, oh, those are Nephilim. Short Nephilim, okay? Kiki Mora, let's see, is Slavic. It says a female house spirit, so that's not it. So we're going to have the Yaren wild men in Southeast Asia. Special wild men of the woods, medieval Europe. Woodawos in England, a medieval wild men, often giant-like. Abraman in ancient Greece and Pliny, a mythical wild people living in the Himalayas with reverse feet, sometimes imagined as giants. Gigantes in Greek mythology, race of primeval giants, often battling the gods. So that's the Titans. The Titans were going to be the first. So you're going to have the same thing in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in China, in the Near East, in Babylonia. You're going to have the first people, and they're going to be called gods because they're the ancestor gods. The second one are going to be these demigods, these half-breed people, okay? In the Greek mythology, you're going to have the first ones, which are going to be the sons of Oranos, which means actually means the heavens. And then the second one is going to be the Titans, which are going to be the people who come from Kronos and those guys, Kronos and his brothers and sisters. And then the third is going to be the gods, which are going to be Zeus and his brothers and sisters. And you just want to think of that as like the original gods and ancestor deities, followed by the Nephilim, followed by the lines of Noah and them being worshipped as gods. That's all it is. It just gets transposed into different cultures. So the most common traits of all these are a wild man. He's hairy. He's bipedal. He's giant. Okay? That's what you have Nephilim as. And you literally have them in every corner of the earth in various cultural myths. So what do we say? We say it's all about the Nephilim, baby. So let's get our awesome picture here. We say it's all about the Nephilim, baby. So, if you get your timelines right and your genealogies right and you understand when all this stuff happens, it's going to make perfect sense. I have searched all the known mythologies. There is no reference to homosexuality. There might be references to bestiality, but it seems to be Nephilim. Okay, it seems to be the angels that are producing Nephilim, but they sometimes show up in the form of beasts. Okay, all of the stuff after that, you have no homosexuality or any kind of sexual perversion in the earth anywhere until you get to Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19. Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19 is going to be roughly in the ballpark of, I believe, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I believe it's going to be 17 or 1800s BCE. The next instance of all ancient mythology that you're going to find anything related to homosexuality is going to be around 1500 BCE, which is going to be the myth of Horus sodomizing Set as a way of showing dominion over him. And this is important to know why. It's in the generation that overthrows the kings of Egypt that are friendly with the Israelites and then puts the Israelites into subjugation that does this. Set, another name for Set, is Seth. And because they didn't know the name Yahweh until Moses, Lord makes that clear in Exodus, because they didn't know the name Yahweh until Moses, they would have called the Lord the God of Seth. Because what you're going to have here is in Genesis 5, you're going to have, we're going to go 4. In Genesis 4, you're going to have Adam knew his wife again. They bear a son called Seth. For God says, she has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, who Cain slew. Okay? So Seth is going to replace Abel, which means he's probably going to marry the woman that was supposed to marry Abel. And that woman is going to be single for a long time, so she becomes the original Virgin Mary, if you will. And then Seth bore him a son and called his name Enosh. And Enosh means, in Sumerian, Enush means the priesthood is established. Then men began to call on the name of the Lord, the name of Yahweh, okay? Well, we don't know if they knew him as Yahweh, because Moses said Abraham didn't even know him as Yahweh. So what are they calling him? Well, it seems like they're calling him Utu. And it's not strange for the Lord to change names, because he's going to go from being Yahweh in the Bible to being Jesus, and then when he comes back in the book of Revelation, he's going to have a new name. So it's not strange for the Lord to have a new name over time. But he seems to be Utu, the sun god, first. Then he seems to be Yahweh, but that's not revealed until Moses. So who they seem to have been calling him was the god of Seth. So Seth's son is Enosh, and Enosh would be the god of Seth, because the Canaanites are going to worship serpent gods, and the god of Seth would be the high god, and then they call him Utu. But remember, Utu is just the generic word for the sun. Well, Shamash is what they called him in the Old Testament, and Jesus is called the Son of Righteousness. So look at this. This is a legitimate name for Jesus, is the Son of Righteousness, okay? What's the word for son? Shemesh. S-U-N is Shemesh. What did the Akkadians call the sun god? Shamash. Shemesh. It's a legitimate name for the Lord. So Utu was the Sumerian, which is a Canaanite language, and Shemesh is the Akkadian, which is a Semite language. And they called him Shamash. Well, they didn't have vowels. So Shemesh or Shamash is the same name. So the Son of Righteousness, this is right out of Malachi, is a legitimate name for the Lord. Shamash is a legitimate name for him. There you go, you guys. So Shamash becomes, Utu and Shamash become merged as one, and Shamash becomes the son of Anu, because Anu is Noah, and Noah gets transposed onto the Lord. Shamash is Shem and gets transposed onto the sun god, and Shamash the son of Anu is Shem the son of Noah, and Shem the son of Noah, Shemesh the son of Anu, is who Hammurabi accredits with giving him the code of Hammurabi. So that means it came from Melchizedek. So the rule of law that the whole world is under is the code of Hammurabi. The rule of law that the Jews are under is the Mosaic code, and that's why they're so similar. Boom, okay? So now he's the Shemesh of righteousness. So Shemesh or Shamash is a legitimate name for the Lord, but he goes on to be called Yahweh, and he reveals himself as the name Yahweh. So we're always calling him by the latest name that he's revealed, okay? But his name changes. Now he's called Jesus or Yeshua, so we call him that, and when he comes back in the book of Revelation, he's going to have a new name. Now, we get new names in the Lord. Jacob and Esau got new names in the Lord. Abraham got a new name in the Lord. David got a new name in the Lord. Joshua got a new name in the Lord. So it stands to reason that the Lord can get new names. Okay? So, the god of Seth, this is important, is Utu, the sun god. The Egyptians' name for the sun is Ra, okay? And Ra is said on Egyptian coffins that he sent the flood and he sent the four winds so that everyone would have the breath of life. The Lord is Ra to the Egyptians. It's the sun. It's just their name, for the word for the sun. Okay, so Shemesh or Shamash, it was understood there was a symbol next to it that meant God of the sun, not the sun itself. Okay, and so in Egypt, it was a god who pushed the sun across the sky, and this comes from the Lord appearing in the Garden of Eden in the evening after the sun was down. Okay, so Shemesh, Utu, and Ra are all based on the Lord as the sun god, and then he becomes Yahweh, the god of the storm. Seth is the god of the storm, and the Egyptians have Horus, which seems to be based on Enoch or Enki, as this god of the sky who is somehow related to the sun god. So he's almost like replacing the sun god, but it's this god of the sky who avenges his father Osiris, who's the god of the dead, who seems to be based on Dumuzid. So Osiris and Dumuzid and Tammuz seem to be the same god. And Osiris becomes the main god of the Egyptians when they overthrow the ones that are friendly to them. And that's why Osiris's son Horus is in a legend sodomizing Seth as submission, because what they're showing is that they're overthrowing Yahweh, the storm god, which is who they're calling Seth, or the god of Seth. And then Ra stops being worshipped, and Osiris starts being worshipped in the place of Ra, and his son Horus starts being worshipped in the place of Ra as well. So it's the god of the underworld and Horus, and they're going to start changing the names of the Egyptian kings to be things like Thutmose, which means Thoth is born. So that's the messenger of the gods. Amoses, okay, which means Haman or Ammon is born, that is going to be the reincarnation of Haman. That's where reincarnation comes from. So all this corruption, this Gnostic inversion of the Egyptian religion from something that was compatible with Judaism to something that is an opposite of Judaism happens in the generation that overthrows Israel and turns them into slaves. You have something similar happen in Mesoamerican, where they invert everything to make the snake be the good guy and the sun god and the storm god be the bad guy. Okay, that's in Mesoamerica. And that's also around 1500 BCE, which is the same time that Jews are turned to slaves. Okay, so there's something that's happening all around the world that Satan is getting them to Gnostically invert their original pagan mythology, which was based around kind of a telephone game, slightly corrupted version of the true biblical narrative, to become a Gnostic inversion of that, where it's like all of a sudden the snake god is the good god. And that's why the pharaohs start wearing the snake headdress and the snake on their forehead, and that's where the snake becomes the god of wisdom, and that's where they put together the Apis bull, which is the bull of heaven merged with the sun disk with a snake on his forehead. It's an anti-trinity. It's an antichrist. Okay? So all of this stuff happens, and that is the oldest pagan incidence of homosexuality I can find anywhere. I'm searching the internet. I'm searching ancient mythologies. I'm searching ancient mysteries. I can't find any instance of homosexuality older than that of Horus and Seth, because it's literally making their false god, which is basically Satan. I mean, it's all based on Satan, and they start worshiping this serpent god of wisdom, which before that, Seth or Set was somebody who helped Ra, the sun god, attack Apophis, the serpent god. And you have pictures of Seth stabbing him with a spear, and he's riding the boat of Ra to do it. Okay? So Seth used to be the good guy, and that's why he's called the god of Seth, and he becomes the bad guy. Ra becomes diminished and eventually replaced by Horus, and then Osiris becomes the main god. And Apophis gets replaced with another serpent god who becomes this god of wisdom and order. Okay? So this is where all your Gnostic mysteries come from. This is where your Freemasonry, your Egyptian mysteries, your Greek philosophy, and all the stuff that crept into Judaism and the Roman Catholic Church came from. Okay? So, what is my point? My point is the Nephilim and homosexuality coming from Nephilim spirits happened exclusively in Canaan. When it creeps into the Egyptian mythology, they're ruling over Canaan. So if we look at Egypt, This is the new kingdom of Egypt. This is when the Jews would have been friendly with Egypt. They ruled all the way up to Carchemish, which, remember, the Jews are getting their wives from Haran, which is right over here, and the Egyptians and the Jews ruled all of this. The Egyptians and the Israelites. Remember, they were partners. Avaris was their capital, and so they were ruling all of this with the Egyptian armies, as well as Crete and Cyprus, okay? And all of this is theirs, and then Thebes is going to get overthrown by these southern Egyptian tribes, who are the ones who Gnostically invert the religion, and they are going to overthrow Thebes, and then the government in exile goes to Abydos. The government in exile is going to go to Abydos, and then I read in a book on world mythologies that they have genetic evidence that the people of Abydos went to India. That's where they go, and that's how reincarnation gets over there. And they're going to enslave the Egyptians. It says this is in Manetho's history. They push them out of all the Egyptian territories back to Avaris, but then they multiply in Avaris and they get really populated there because all these other Israelites from over here join them. Well, the region is because the Israelites are in Egypt and also all up in here, but then the Amorites get kicked out of Mesopotamia and they come back here. So Og, king of Bashan, and his family, so we have Nephilim plus the Amorites, all come back here, and they push the Israelites out of here back into Goshen, and they take over. They're going to take over this area over here on the other side of, that's the Dead Sea, and then this is going to be where you see Damascus is this region right here they take over, which is where Og, king of Bashan, is. And then the sons of Anak, which is where Goliath and those guys come from, they're going to take over Hebron. So they're going to push out the Israelites out of here, and these are going to be the half-tribe of Manasseh and the Judahites who were living here, and then they're going to go to Avaris, and they're going to multiply their numbers at Avaris. And that's why the Egyptians are going to say, even though we subjugated them, they keep multiplying faster than we do, and that's when they're going to kill the firstborn. All of this stuff is going to happen around, I'm ballparking, around 1550 BCE. In the generation that they decide to kill the firstborn, that's when Moses and Aaron is born, and 80 years later they come out of captivity. So there's a date that I have strictly based on Usher's chronology and my chronology of the King James Version, and then there's a date that Christian archaeologists have, and there's a range of about 50 years within that date. And I'm allowing that range to say, I believe I could be, my chronology could be off by 50 years because I'm seeing evidences in the Bible of years that shouldn't be so strict and overlaps and stuff like that. And there seems to be pretty solid archaeological evidence for the Egyptian king who sacks Jerusalem under Solomon's son being at a specific nailed down date, which would make the Exodus in 1446 BCE. Well, add 80 years to 1446 BCE, and you're going to get yourself around 1526 BCE. So that's within 25 years of my estimate. Okay? So Moses and Aaron are going to be born 80 Moses is going to be born 80 years before the Exodus. And it's roughly 20 years before that, which is when the Jews are going to get thrown into captivity, plus the Amorites and their Nephilim giants are going to come back from Mesopotamia because they get kicked out by the Kashite dynasty, which seems to be a dynasty descended from Cush that takes them out and kicks them out of Mesopotamia, and they take over this all the way up to here, and they push them on this side of the Euphrates River, and then the Amorites take over all of this in the north. So you see this northern area down to here, and then the Nephilim come up here and take over Jerusalem, and then the Jebusites and the Canaanites, they basically take back all the highlands from Egypt, and Egypt has a little power in the lowlands, but because they're busy oppressing the Jews, they never get that power back. They're trying all the way to the days of Pharaoh Necho under Assyria that we just covered, and they never get it back. This is the zenith of Egypt's power, and once they turn on the Israelites, they never go back to having that power again. So Egypt is controlling Canaan before that, and this is where the homosexuality, the demonic Nephilim spirit-based homosexuality, creeps into the Egyptian religion. What I'm finding in my history is we don't really have clear evidence of homosexuality in Assyria and Babylon, but we do have it in Persian stuff. And what it seems to be is whoever is the world power takes turns in owning the promised land. So this promised land, this whole area basically from Avaris up to here, but that really doesn't include the Sinai Peninsula, is the promised land, okay? All the way up to the Euphrates River. All of that is promised to Abraham. And Egypt has it first, then the Jews have it, but then they fall into homosexuality and all this stuff because of the corruption of the Nephilim spirits. And then after them, the Assyrians take it over, and then after them, the Babylonians take it over, and then after them, the Persians take it over. And we find stuff in Zoroastrian and Avestan literature trying to forbid homosexuality because it's creeping over to them. After them, the Greeks, and we know the Greeks have all kinds of homosexuality, and then the Romans, and they have all kinds of homosexuality. So what it seems to be is whoever takes over Canaan, homosexuality spreads into their culture. And now, because Rome is everywhere in the world, and its embassies are in the Roman Catholic Church, which is rank with homosexuality and pedophilia, the thing that's spreading homosexual and pedophilia, or the Nephilim spirits, throughout the earth, is the primary institution is the Roman Catholic Church. That's what it is. It's not like it's not other places. It's the mystery cults too, but it's also the Roman Catholic Church, because that's where these spirits are being summoned up, and they're being followed, and they're manipulating people. And what are they doing? Secret sex cults. The Rosicrucians and the Freemasons and all that stuff have secret sex cults. The compass and square is a sexual symbol, okay? They're secret sex cults. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church is a secret sex cult. Because you have all these gay and pedophile priests who are playing grab ass and doing their thing for 2,000 years, and that's where homosexuality spreads throughout the earth. Now think about this. How many homosexuals and pedophiles in the earth started out with somebody who molested somebody, or somebody who molested somebody, and somebody who molested somebody, and the original molester was a Catholic priest? Think about that, you guys. How many of them started that way? Because I know people who've been molested, but think about how many the OG might have been those centuries and centuries of celibate priests that started out doing the molesting or the raping. And what does the Bible call that? It calls it folly in going after strange flesh. So what does Jude call it? We're going all the way back to Jude. He calls it, they left their first estate. They left their own principality. They left their own habitation. I'll say first estate and then own habitation. So their own principality and their idios, self, house, their own house. So he too does mean, I think, first. They kept not their archy, their principality. They left their own houses, their habitations, which seems to be the stars. And they are reserved in chains under darkness until the chain of darkness till the great day. That might be the black holes, you guys. That might be the eternal darkness that they're in, is black holes. So literally, stars might actually be angels. Think about that. Stars might actually be angels. And there are people who have like focused in on stars, and then you look at them really close, and it looks like that's not a giant circular ball of gas billions of miles away. It's actually less far away, and it's an angel. They actually are just like, there's halos and stuff like that, okay? And black holes could be those stars that are in chains of darkness reserved for judgment. The ones that left their estate and made the Nephilim could be the black holes. So he says, they gave themselves over to fornication, going after strange flesh, which is all sexual immorality, and are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire, okay? So Sodom and Gomorrah are set forth as an example because they burned in sulfur and hellfire, basically. That's what happened, okay? These guys are kept in everlasting chains under darkness, okay? So think about this. Remember how I say, think of God like a giant star bigger than the universe, but like a black hole because there's nothing outside of him, but thick darkness, okay? That's why, let's look at this. Eternal fire, everlasting darkness. That's the judgment of the angels who sinned by going after strange flesh. That's the judgment of the people who sinned by going after strange flesh. Eternal fire, everlasting chains under darkness. So Sodom and Gomorrah is the example of eternal fire. Black holes seems to be the example of eternal darkness. Imagine a star where it's basically completely self-absorbed. It's alone. It can't see anything. They're in chains of darkness. It says that they fear being cast into the abyss, okay? Well, the abyss might be a bottomless pit. It might be the same chasm that's between the good side and the bad side of Sheol. That might be the abyss. Or it might be outer space. So let's see. Because it says the earth was without form and void. Let's see. Utterly made a void. Let's see. It says, "O you inhabitants of Moab, leave the cities and dwell on the rock. Be like the dove that makes her nest over the mouth of the abyss." Luke said the demons entreated him. This is the American, this is American Standard. They call it the deep. To not command them to depart into the abyss. Who shall descend into the deep? That is to bring up the dead. So it seems to be that pit that's between the good side and bad side. So it could be a term for Sheol. The angels given the key to the bottomless pit. That seems to be in the earth. The smoke ascended out of the pit. So if it's a belly in the center of the earth, it's a bottomless pit because there's no bottom to it. So the abyss and the bottomless pit seem to be in the belly of the earth. Maybe that's not in outer space, but it also says in Genesis 1, it says the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. So that could refer to the sea, or it could refer to outer space. It seems like the face of the deep could be outer space. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So if the earth was without form and void, in other words, it was unformed and unfilled, it's just a water ball with the Spirit on the surface of the waters, and darkness was on the face of the deep, seems like all of outer space was just darkness. That seems to be what it's describing. The earth is a water ball. It's not been formed or shaped or anything or filled. And outer space is the deep. And the angels are saying, don't send us into the deep or the abyss. That seems to be what it's saying. In other words, don't cast us out into outer space, outer darkness, which is where their fathers are. They used to be stars, and now they're black holes. That seems to be what they're saying. So I'm going to hold that loose because I'm just comparing that. Now let's compare that to Romans 1 and what it says about how people are given over to homosexuality. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and the injustice of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Just so you know, this is my Apostles' Teaching Translation, and this will be clearer in my Apostles' Teaching Translation than it will in any other Bible you find, okay? Because what may be known of God is manifest in them. The word in them is important. It can be among them or it can be in them. But it's saying I chose the word in them because I believe we're the image of God, and it's saying what may be known of God is manifest in them. Okay, for God has shown it to them. For the invisible things of him that have been seen since the creation of the cosmos, being understood by the things that he's made, both his eternal power and his divinity. So his eternal power is demonstrated in the order of the universe. His divinity is demonstrated in us being his image, man, woman, and child. That's his Godhead. Okay. Other translations will say divine nature. It's divinity, Godhead, or divine nature, which is in man, woman, and child, unto their becoming inexcusable. For when they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give thanks, but instead became vain in their reasoning. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the imperishable God into images of perishable man. Now listen to this. The glory of God is man. This is what Corinthians says. This is Paul, what he wrote just before he wrote this. Man is the glory of God, okay? So they changed the glory of God, which is a living man. You're the image of God, okay? That's why you're not supposed to make graven images of God. Those are dead images. You're a living image of God, okay? Into the image of perishable man. In other words, they take their dead ancestors and make gods out of them, okay? And birds and beasts and serpents. So there's your bull god, there's your bird-headed Egyptian gods, and there is your serpent's god. That's also, your Catholics with your dove in the place of representing the Holy Spirit. You're not supposed to make graven images. Okay? As a consequence, God also surrendered them to impurity in the desires of their hearts, to disgrace their bodies among themselves those who changed the truth of God into a lie and venerated and worshiped what is created above the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So as a consequence of them changing God into these images of man, beasts, your Apis bull, your dead ancestors and all that stuff, he says because of this, God gave them over to shameful passions. So you want to corrupt the image of God, which is the family unit. The family unit is your Trinity. A man is the image of Jesus. A family unit is an image of the Trinity. Okay? Those are living images of a living God. We don't make graven images. He says because they did this and they reduced God to these corrupt graven images, God gave them over to shameful passions, for both their females exchanged their natural sexuality for what is against nature, and likewise also the males abandoned the natural sexuality of the females and burned in their lust towards other men. Men doing with men shameful deeds and receiving in themselves the recompense of their delusion as was necessary. Now, if you read Plato's Timaeus, this is exactly what happened. In Plato's Timaeus, they reduce God to the number one, and he is an ineffable, indiscernible being that you can't comprehend and you can't express with words. Yes, you can. This is the image of God the Father. This is the image of the Son, and the woman is the image of the Holy Spirit. It's that simple. It's that simple. Man, helper, son. Father, helper, son. Father, helper, son. It's everywhere in the earth. This is why Satan wants to destroy the heterosexual family unit. Okay? That's the image of God. So, he says, if you destroy the natural sexual unit, which is what the Pythagoreans did, they said God must be one. He must be the loneliest number because God must be mono. He must be one. He can't be three persons. He must be one person. They made the second creature to be a hermaphroditic male-female duad, a monad and a duad. So they basically said it's God is a lonely man with a he-she for a son. Where is the world going right now? God is a lonely man with a he-she for a son. So what is mankind being given over to? Single men who do all the work and pay all the bills while the women rip off their kids and go and turn their kids into trannies. Do you think that's a coincidence? It's not a coincidence. It says God gave them over to this, listen, and receiving in themselves the recompense of their delusion, which was necessary. In other words, the due payment of their delusion. If you turn God into a single man with a he-she son, don't be shocked if your single men are sitting here paying all the bills while the women take their kids and turn them into he-she sons. Don't be shocked. And this is what the Greeks did under Pythagoras. They said that women were the corrupted, cowardly reincarnations of men who were cowardly and corrupt in their past lifetime. They become women. And those women, if they give birth to women, they've gotten worse. If they give birth to men, they're getting better because they can reincarnate back into men. This is why the Gospel of Thomas says for a woman to enter into the kingdom of heaven, she must first become a man. That is Pythagorean Neoplatonic doctrine that came in the form of Gnosticism into the Gospel of Thomas. These ideas were around from the days of Plato's Timaeus, which was about 400 years before the Gospel. Okay, we read this in another thing. Go look up Plato's Timaeus on my playlist if you want to listen to that, okay? So what they would say is that the disease of mankind is procreation. They would treat procreation like a disease, and they would say, what you really want to do is have a boy lover because that is more pure than having children because children are just prisons for our fallen spirits. And what they really believe is that our goal is to get to the point where we all want to escape our flesh and become gods again, aka massive suicide cult, aka Kool-Aid man, aka every crazy alien cult that's ever existed. We want to die so we can go back into space. We want to all eject our bodies so we can go back into space. So we want to cease procreating. That's a disease. Women are the worst part of it, and you're better off having a boy lover than you are having a wife and making kids, which is procreating the image of God in the earth. Doesn't it make sense that procreating is exemplifying the Creator? Of course it is. And they want to do the opposite of that. We want to kill everybody, and we want to say that's how you become a god. Okay? This is what these spirits get them to do. Now listen to this. It says, because of this, God gave them over to shameful passions. Okay? Now, it doesn't. Your Bibles are going to say a depraved mind. I don't see that depraved mind in the words. Okay, let's look at Romans 1. He says they gave them up to uncleanness. So moral uncleanness. Remember, unclean spirits bring uncleanness. So that's how they're given up to uncleanness. God allows a demonic spirit, just like that spirit saying, I'm going to be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets. This spirit is going to delude them towards demonic, unclean spirit behavior. Nephilim spirits, okay? And so he says, God gave them up to, vile affections. So it says atima, pathos, affections, vile lust, vile passions. I'm trying to see where it says depraved mind. Oh, a reprobate mind. So adomikimos, unapproved, rejected mind. Okay, a rejected mind. Remember, a spirit of rejection. Okay, a rejected mind. Your mind feels like you're rejected by God. Why? Because you've rejected God. You've rejected the pure image of God, so you're given over to a reprobate mind, a rejected form of God. Now, I can tell you, I've personally experienced the spirit of rejection. It will drive you to try to kill yourself and try to basically corrupt yourself. That's what a rejected mind is. Because why? Because you're worshiping a form of God that's not what God gave you. Do you know when that happened to me? First it happened to me after being exposed to drugs and the occult. Then it happened to me after being exposed to Calvinism. That's when it happened to me. Why? Because we just saw from Eliphaz the Temanite that the belief in total depravity and reprobate mind and all that stuff, like being born reprobate, comes from Calvinism, and it came from a demon to Eliphaz the Temanite. Every man that dies for wickedness. Their wickedness. Babies that die in the womb are wicked babies. Eliphaz the Temanite, from a demon. That exact doctrine. It didn't come from the New Testament. It came from a demon to Eliphaz. Okay? So now, we're going to see that it says that, okay, they are, even as they did not, we're going to go back to my translation. It says, and just as they did not approve to have God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a worthless mind, so that's the demonic mind, okay, to do what is unbecoming, being filled with every unrighteousness. Now this is what the Nephilim spirits bring to you. Unrighteousness, fornication. So the starting point is unrighteousness or injustice, okay? They're not fair, they're mean, okay? They're not out to do what's right. Fornication is number one. Wickedness, covetousness, malice, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and bad character. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant boasters, contrivers of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, unfaithful, without natural affection, and merciless, who, knowing the judgment of God, that those who habitually are of this sort are worthy of death, not only do these things, but are also pleased with those that practice them. So I don't just like to do these things myself. I approve when other people do them. All these wicked things. Does that sound like our culture? Arrogant boasters, contrivers of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, unfaithful, without natural affection, and merciless? Yes, it is. This is what we become when we give over our belief in who God is like to being a corrupted man or a bird or a beast. So when your church has a picture of God as an old man in the sky with no wife or kids, with a pet bird and a lamb, or an effeminate boy son. Let's look at it. Hold on. God is an old man with an effeminate son and a pet bird. There ain't no women in there. Where did the son come from? Oh, don't worry about that. If I'm sorry, you're too old to begin the Padawan training. We only like boys who are younger than a certain age. If you're too old to begin the training, you're going to find it weird when we try to teach you how to hold a lightsaber properly. So we need you to be very young so that you, look at these fairies. Look at us. Welcome to the club. Welcome to gay-ass Catholic club. Welcome to the club. Look at him. Look at him. Catholic Trinity, okay? Now look at this. God is a flux capacitor. This came from Pythagoras. God is a hand signature, which came from paganism, a sheep, and what did he say? Corrupted man, beasts, and birds. God is a triangle head, a guy with a cross, and a bird. Corruptible man, perishable man, and birds. God is a man, a boy, and a bird. God is a triangle man, a cross man, and a bird. Old man, young man, bird, a.k.a. ready? Jedi Master, Padawan learner, and a bird. God is a Jedi Master, Qui-Gon Jinn, little Obi-Wan, and a bird representing the Force. God is a old man, young man who doesn't like to wear clothes that much, and a bird. Oh, and what's surrounding him? Naked babies. Naked babies. Why are the angels naked babies to them? Where did they come up with the idea that the angels are naked babies? Naked little children. They're screaming what they're really about, you guys. Where in the Bible or any mythology are angels depicted as little naked babies? They're not. They're not. Qui-Gon Jinn. What is his name? Obi-Wan, the Force, and the Padawans. They're screaming what they're about, and all this came from Plato's Timaeus. Oh, and they're all male naked babies too. Did I mention that they're all male naked babies? I mean, even the Jedi had some girls in there. Look at this. Over and over and over again. Triangle man, Pythagorean triangle. The Force, bird. The sun with the cross. And then surrounded by little naked angel babies. Oh, there's baby Jesus. There's the Force bird, and then the Father and the Son. He never seems to want to wear a shirt. Father, Son, and bird. Father, Son, and bird. Flux capacitor if you're really theologically sound. And don't forget to surround them with naked babies with wings. Okay? So what does that sound like when I read Romans 1? Does that sound more like, let's see, does that sound like God showing mankind as his image and saying man, woman, and child, the family unit, is a picture of the Trinity? Or does that sound more like changing the image of God into the images of perishable man and birds and beasts and serpents? Well, we don't have serpents there, thank God, but the Jews did hold the serpent as a symbol of wisdom, which they got from the Egyptians. As a consequence, God gave them over and surrendered them to impurity and the desires of their heart. Does that sound like what happened to the Catholic priests? Yes. Where did the corruption of doctrine start? In Alexandria, Egypt. That's where they started turning away from marriage. That's where monasteries started. That's where all the doctrines that they wanted to push people towards celibacy were. That's where Origen castrated himself. What got him to castrate himself? Do you think it might have been a spirit of rejection, a depraved mind, a rejected mind that led him to basically do something that would get him permanently kicked out of the church, which is castrating yourself? Maybe that was what it was. And what's behind all this? Nephilim spirits. Nephilim spirits. Nephilim. This is Göbekli Tepe. This is the oldest known human site. What do we have? We have creatures with wings holding their dongs and being half human, half animal. Why? Because everybody wants to bang an angel and have a Nephilim child. That's their antichrists. That's their seed of the woman counterfeit. So we have it in Göbekli Tepe. We have it in ancient Egypt. These are all basically angelic human hybrids. We have it in Ezekiel with these angels. Notice they stand like a man, but they are going to have the wheels with the eyes that go all around, and one's a beast. Remember, one's called the bull of heaven. One's a lion head, which you're going to see this, I think, in the Sphinx. The Sphinx is actually a lion body and a man head. One is more hominid, but it has angel wings, so that's your classic angel. And then one is a bird head. Okay, that's in Ezekiel. But we see the same thing in the Egyptian Mount Hermon is where it started. And Kindu was the second one. Gilgamesh was the first one that we know of. There probably were others, but they were the famous ones. They were pretty much like the Captain America and Iron Man of their day. Okay, so they keep getting recast in story again and again. There's Enkidu. There's Gilgamesh, a giant holding a lion. And there is Sasquatches all over the earth, which is probably what the OG Nephilim look like, because they were made with these bestial angel animal hybrids, and their kids came out to be super hairy and big. Those were the Nephilim. They were Bigfoots, they were Sasquatches, and at the end of the day, get one of these t-shirts, because Bigfoots are Nephilim ghosts. Bigfoots are Nephilim ghosts. And if you wear these t-shirts and somebody asks you, what the heck are you talking about? You can point them to my channel and say, this guy has figured out the Matrix, dude. He's like, it's all about the Nephilim. It's Nephilim spirits, and the Nephilim spirits are trying to take over because they're trying to get us to all kill ourselves to make us want to be angels. That's what it is. It's a huge death cult. That's transhumanism. That's Gnosticism. That's Catholic pedo worship. That's all their stuff going on, and it's all about the Nephilim. So those of you, guess what one of the first things they did when they started rejecting the millennium and all this stuff? They also rejected the idea of Nephilim and said that the Nephilim, the sons of God, were the lines of Seth. They said the sons of God were the lines of Seth. These proto-Orthodox did that too. They said the sons of God were not angels. The sons of God were the lines of Seth. So that one of the first things they did is try to get rid of your belief in Nephilim. And then they started bringing all the other corruptions that came from the Nephilim. That's what Satan's trying to do, and that's why the Presbyterians are going to say Satan is bound in the bottomless pit, so they don't want you to practice deliverance. Why? Because they work for Satan. These are the same people who started the CIA, the same people who had the Freemasons among them, the same people that overthrew England and America and every other country they could think of. They work for Satan, okay? Come out of her, my people. The Presbyterians are a Gnostic cult. They're a Gnostic cult, period. And they are driving theological triage. They're primary behind all the church growth methodology. They have a liberal and conservative Hegelian dialectic version of what they're doing. It's post-millennial. It's anti-spiritual gifts. It's anti-evangelism. It's anti-spreading the gospel. And it's all about subduing the world through either charity or force. That's their dichotomy. And basically getting you to believe that Satan is bound in the bottomless pit. So when the whole world gets demonized, you won't believe it. They work for Satan. Come out of her, my people. Okay? Don't fall for Christian nationalism. Get yourself one of these Bigfoots or Ghost of Nephilim shirts. Or get yourself one of these Biggie Smalls. It's all about the Nephilim baby shirts. And if people are like, what are you talking about? It's all about the Nephilim. Be like, this dude. Because my Serpent by the Way book is going to cover all this. And my teaching on deliverance is going to cover all this. You need to realize that these spirits are unclean spirits because they're the sons of angels who went after strange flesh. So the sins of the father, God revisits the sins of the father onto the sons until the third and fourth generation. So what are the Nephilim spirits doing? Going after strange flesh. So they were probably sodomizing people, they were probably raping, they were probably murdering, and all the stuff that's in Romans 1 when they're alive, and then their ghosts want to keep doing this. So just like you have the man in Sheol that Jesus mentions as being thirsty when he's in Sheol, they hunger and thirst and lust and all this stuff even in their disembodied form. And so they want to take over your body so they can execute those lusts and feel the pleasure of those things. And if they can't do it, they're going to take over your body and try to get you to kill yourself so they can try to get in another host and do it with them. And you have the power only in Jesus' name to be free from them. These are the spirits that go into people, and it's like the ones that are closer. This is why some are stronger and some are weaker. The weaker ones are third, fourth, fifth generation Nephilim that never knew their angelic fathers. The earlier ones are the stronger ones that knew their angelic fathers, so they know a little bit about the rules of heaven and earth. And so those are going to be the ones who are going to resist you, like the guy that resisted the apostles and needed to come out by prayer and fasting, or like the demon that beat the crap out of the 7 sons of Sceva because they weren't really saved. Those are OG Nephilim. The rest are third, fourth, fifth generation Nephilim that are smaller Nephilim. And so because they were smaller in their original form, they're probably smaller in their ghost form. And that's why you have these smaller Bigfoots. And that's why they're less brave. The other ones are more brave because they're actually, they're shades, but those shades are 9 feet tall. So they're feeling pretty strong against us little puny humans. They use intimidation to try to intimidate us because they're big, but they have no power. They're just ghosts. But if you give them power, they're going to try to turn you inside out and get you to do depraved things. And that's why you need to know your Nephilim. You need to know your Nephilim. There's big Nephilim, there's small Nephilim, but they're all just spirits trying to possess your body to get you to do depraved things. It's all about the Nephilim, baby. Okay? So again, check out my merch. It's about spreading the message. It's kind of about making a little bit of bucks on the side, but it's about spreading the message. I want you guys to understand that. I hope you guys have been blessed by this teaching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.